Welcome to Still Evolving, where we explore the truth behind lasting high performance and resilience. Rather than relying on perfection or superhuman ability, our conversation aims to highlight how real strength emerges through simple, intentional habits grounded in self-compassion, adaptability, and the ability to grow through life's inevitable setbacks. So today we're very fortunate to have John Starling, CEO of Potential, to join us. And John, I'm going to turn it over to you to share more about your background and experience, as well as your journey and Still Evolving, and just look forward to the conversation.
Jamie, I really appreciate the opportunity. I guess my backstory is going way back, latchkey kid, single family, single parent home, and then went in the Air Force right out of high school. And then after that went to university and graduated with an English degree. That was a low bar. It's my native language. And I was a teacher for 5 years, both domestically and abroad. And then I came back and I got a job as a chauffeur that lasted a month. They wanted me to come into their insurance company, and it was, 6 sons, and I wasn't one of the sons, so I wasn't going to do that. But they referred me to another company. I went and worked in this asset-backed securities company as a data entry clerk for a day. I quit that. Guy wouldn't let me quit. He asked me to be his marketing guy. A year later, I was his vice president and for investor relations and marketing. Left with his blessing, started my own firm, the first of probably 5 different management consulting and marketing firms that I owned over 20 years. And then I developed some youth programs along the way to help out young kids that were at risk or marginalized. And I wanted to do something to help people at scale, and that's Potential. Can reach millions and millions of people and help them really get into a growth conversation with themselves. I always refer to Potential as a conversation starter with yourself, maybe with a capital S there. I don't know. You're the
That's awesome, John. I'm curious, we've talked a lot about taking life's punches or the invariable setbacks that we all experience in life. I'm curious if you can share what tools or strategies or even lessons have helped you keep moving forward and evolving.
Boy, it's not the punch, it's the bounce, right? It's whether or not you can, literally, so as one of the youth programs I started was an MMA school for at-risk kids. And I Thai boxed in Korea, of all places. So I've literally been punched a lot of times. And everybody gets that in life, literally or figuratively. And you get knocked down. If you're playing big, if you're playing a big game, if you play small, I guess maybe some people never really get knocked down their whole lives. They just shield themselves from that. But if you're playing for big stakes, either for yourself or for others, you're going to get canvassed. And then the question is, do you get up? How quickly do you get up? I've been knocked down a lot, I would say first and foremost by myself, if that makes sense. I feel like, whatever my fighting record is, I think I've taken most of my losses from me. Self-sabotage has always been my worst enemy, whether it was through, just undermining myself or alcoholism or whatever. I've been sober for many years and will never go back with the grace of God. I think being in the military at a young age in a combat arms position, you get tested and you find out who you are and who you aren't. And then putting myself through college on the GI Bill, and right out of college, my first college job was as a private investigator because I'd been a military policeman and I had worked undercover for one of the Air Force organizations. And being a private investigator was wild, wild way to spend my early 20s. And then, educationally, getting knocked down because I was not a great student in high school. And college, I ended up in the honors program, but I took some lumps, especially in like math courses. So, and then as an entrepreneur, you're going to fail way more than you win. That's just the nature of it. Whether it's sales or when I was doing growth strategy for companies, I had a good record. I helped hundreds of companies grow, but helped, I would say I underwhelmed almost as many.
Hmm.
And I think where you and I intersect is I sort of diagnosed it over the years after about 15 years doing growth strategy for companies, training, consulting, advising. I realized that a lot of the plans that I was helping companies develop were never put in place, never fully implemented, simply because human beings don't like change. And I took that as a personal failure for a long time. And then I started hiring coaches, I started taking transformational learning courses, and I got comfortable with change myself. And I learned how to get other people comfortable with change. Because no matter what that plan says, it represents change for everybody in the organization at the level that I was doing it. And getting people okay with that was something that I think was a big help. But
Yeah.
I keep swinging and I keep getting knocked down and I keep failing, and what else are you going to do other than
Right.
get back
Right.
up?
Get back up.
I
You
mean,
know, I love the where you grew and evolved to recognizing that like change is uncomfortable. We use a phrase a lot. It really, I first started using it in sport, but later with special forces, and certainly even now, I even use it with my kids. They're probably annoyed with it, but get the phrase of getting comfortable with being uncomfortable.
yeah,
Because the reality, like you said, perhaps I don't even know if it's playing small or playing big, but like life, invariably there are going to be conversations that are uncomfortable in your personal life, in the role that you have in your community or in your family or in your workspace, whether you're a leader, individual contributor, or regardless of that role. There's a lot of uncomfortable spaces in life. So I
yeah,
love that
yeah. That's
that element.
You zeroed in on it. You have to spend so much time out of your comfort zone that your comfort zone expands, and that's just where you live. Now, even though my comfort zone has expanded greatly over my lifetime, I'm still challenged all the time to expand it even further. But this is why people say it's lonely at the top or whatever, because they see somebody who's achieving things, right? Setting up a free dojo for kids, or I set up a first of its kind rec soccer program for little girls in Korea when my wife and daughter and I lived there. And they see it and they're marveling. And all it is that my comfort zone is always expanding and I'm always pushing it to the next level. I'll give you one interesting sort of a theosophical history lesson. When the Buddha reached enlightenment, the other monks that were traveling with him said, "How do you do that?" And he laid out the Four Noble Truths. The first noble truth is that life is suffering, and suffering is synonymous in his original language with change. And the second noble truth is that we suffer because of attachment. And the third noble truth is that it doesn't have to be this way. And the fourth noble truth is here's how. The Dharma. And what I interpret that as, my interpretation of that is, and this is just to give your audiences access on how to get comfortable with change, right, is when you're living your life powerfully for other people, there's no suffering, right? Because as Gandhi said in the end of his autobiography, he said, "I have reduced myself to zero," right? So if you want to, I believe that if a person wants to expand their comfort zone, go out and play hard for somebody else. Go out and play hard for your team, for your community, for your family, something that's outside of you. And there's no you in that. When you're really playing full out, there's really no you to suffer and to worry about change and all that kind of stuff. And that's sort of the way I did it. I wasn't always really comfortable with all of that for me. But I started really playing hard for young people and for marginalized people. And then I've played so hard for so long for them, that's where I built the muscle, right? And then it's made it easier for me to make little changes in my life, like, it's going to sound funny, for a veteran and a person with multiple black belts to say this, but being home alone. Like, that's something that for years unnerved me. I just did not like to be home alone. Grew up a latchkey kid, right? And now I'm very comfortable with it. My wife goes away sometimes weeks at a time for work, and here I am, and it's me and the dogs. Everything's good. But I had to work on that for me. But the way I got access to being okay with change and changes in me and changes, etc., was to put other people first. That was my training ground. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. You know, we talk a lot about performance, the role of mindsets, and to hear you describe, really it became this mindset, this perspective that you embraced of service for those in your life, right? Your family, as you described, maybe in the situation of adjusting to the uncomfortableness of being at home alone, or the service that you are really invested in living in service of perhaps those who you're working with, the companies you founded, those clients that you are actually helping along the way, strengthening, growing.
Your employees, for me, they're like my kids. You know what I mean? That I care for them, I protect them, I go out of my comfort zone to serve them, honor them, and watch them grow, and we all bear the fruits of it.
You mentioned, John, a little bit earlier in your journey, the role of different relationships, the training, perhaps the coaching relationships that you had and learning from. But I'm just curious if you could talk about that power that came from connection, the connection, maybe certain relationships that really shaped your journey, your story. If you could kind of share back more on those connections.
Yeah, so growing up without a direct father figure, because my folks split up when I was 3, and I didn't really get connected to my dad until I was out of the military and would go visit him and stuff. But I really sought out mentorship, specifically male role model mentorship. And that's expanded over time to be more encompassing, but specifically that. And, I remember when I went to Air Base Ground Defense School at Fort Dix, New Jersey, and there was a detachment of Rangers there that taught those skills to us. And they were the greatest teachers I've ever experienced in my life. Humble, solid, amazing. And I really connected with one of them, Sergeant Winters. I'll never forget that guy. And then at my first duty station, I became really good friends with a tech sergeant who, he had a master's degree, but he joined the Air Force after being a U.S. Marshal. He joined the Air Force too late to be an officer. And we're still friends to this day. And he got me reading the classics and, reading, everything from Buddhist literature to Plutarch's 9 Greek Lives, right? And, so I've just always, my stepfather was a great mentor. I did carpentry. And, after the cert, when I was a teacher, I would spend my summers building houses and stuff. And, studied from carpenters, sailors, soldiers, black belts, just this collection of, this pantheon of wise people that are older and more experienced than me. And now I guess I've become the older, more experienced guy because I have a lot of people that I mentor to this day. We just had our 25th wedding anniversary, and a bunch of the kids from the karate school who are now in their early 30s and have kids, they came and they brought their children, and they stood for my family and I and talked to the party about the things that they had learned in the dojo and in working on our property, the real Mr. Miyagi kind of experience that they had. But I'm a sponge for that kind of stuff. My main mentor, still after many years, is Bill Clark, and he's probably 86 now. Circumnavigated the globe in a 41-foot sailboat, built, sold, bought 9 different companies. 10th generation Mason. I'm not a Mason, but those guys seem to know things. His family was on the Mayflower. This kind of stuff. And I just soak that stuff up. To me, that's the most important currency. Like for me, everybody has their own gold standard, right? And for some people, it's gold. And I used to have judgment against that, even though I was helping them make money. For me, growing up without it and now having it, it's very meaningless. I don't, attach a whole lot of meaning to it. I can buy whatever I want. I don't, I never forget the first time I walked into a mall after we had really made it, and I was like, wow, I could buy anything I wanted in this entire place. Like growing up, that was not an option. And but what is of value to me is wisdom. Collecting wisdom, sharing wisdom, learning from people like you. Right. Like I said, my view has expanded beyond just male mentorships. I have a lot of female mentors, including my wife and daughter. They're wise people, you know.
Yeah.
And that's the most important currency to me now.
Very cool, John. Very cool. Well, certainly I appreciate just the realness of your sharing and your story and those takeaways. One of the, I guess, missions of this conversation also is to bring the audience actionable tips or actionable tools. Like you, we've probably kicked it a lot. Just different ideas. I can nerd out with the best of them, whether it's just on the research or real life experiences that have informed how we lead. But for you, what would you like to share that's an immediate actionable tool, strategy, tip that our listeners could put into practice in their still evolving journey as they, regardless of the role that may bring?
Yeah, I'll tell you straight up. I'm going to switch metaphors for a second. You are going to pay the tuition in life. I remember the first time in business, I paid it many times before that in the military, etc. But I remember the first time in business, we had a company, it was called Smith Content, and it was a content development company. It was actually the first pure copywriting company in America back in the early 2000s. And around the time September 11th happened, and everybody froze up, especially small businesses. People weren't paying their bills. Nobody knew if the U.S. economy was going to survive that. It was a real dicey time for a lot of reasons. And to be a business owner that had just taken on employees and a new office and all this kind of stuff. And suddenly we were $67,000 in debt, which was all the money in the world to us, and then some at the time. And we got through it. You know, it's me and Rob McDonald, still my best friend. His oldest is my godchild. We got through it, and we ran that company until 2007. But we made a very clear decision. We said, we're paying $67,000 in tuition. We're getting full credit for this course. Meaning that we're paying the tuition. We are going to walk out of there with the learning. What did we learn from this, right? And I've applied that to every loss and setback I experienced, whether financial, emotional, physical, whatever. There is a lesson to be learned here, and I will be damned if I'm going to pay that tuition and not get the lesson. So I do, you know, in my former life and in your life, working with the military and stuff, it's a debrief, right? It's an after action. Whatever the current lingo of the day is. It's been a long time for me. But I'm going to do that after action report, and I'm going to learn from that, and I'm going to grow from it. And one of my favorite clients was a company they're still around, called Benalogic. And the president of that company, Christine Meeke, brilliant woman, she has over her desk, make new mistakes every day. And implicit in that is don't come to me with the same mistake over and over again, right? But she's just brilliant. And it jives with my worldview. You know, I'm going to go out and make new mistakes. But when I make that mistake, or, you know, I get knocked down or whatever, you know, yeah, I would do this with the kids in the dojo too. You know, they'd be sparring or they'd have a sanctioned fight or whatever. And, you know, they get busted up. They lose. You know, let's talk about it. You know, what happened there? You know, you didn't keep your guard up. Let's not do that again. You know,
Right.
Didn't use your jab. Yeah, okay, lesson learned.
Yeah, I love that, John. I think in so many ways, starting at the beginning of our conversation, talking about getting comfortable with being uncomfortable, and then like learning from those punches, those setbacks in life, maybe it's in business. Truly, that is how we are growing and we are getting stronger and we are evolving, right? So if we try to stay comfortable or try to be so protected that we aren't stepping out there and making mistakes, it's really hard for that growth, for that evolution to occur. So thank you so much for sharing back today on Still Evolving, and just very grateful for you and the opportunity to learn from you as well, and just appreciate your realness in sharing today. So thank you.
You're quite welcome. Thanks, Amy.